The first time I realized something was terribly wrong was when I walked into my apartment and smelled my mother's perfume, soft floral, impossible to ignore. She had been there. Again. My parents kept breaking into my apartment like it was still my childhood bedroom, rearranging things, leaving food, acting as if my adult life was just an extension of theirs. I changed the locks, I pleaded, I shouted. Nothing stopped them. So I did the only thing left. I moved without telling them and let the silence swallow everything. But the moment they finally found out wasn't the moment I expected. My name is Jennifer, and for most of my life, I thought being a good daughter meant staying quiet. I grew up in a small neighborhood outside Portland where my parents, Marilyn and Edward, believed love was something you demonstrated through supervision. They hovered, corrected, monitored, and insisted they always knew what was best. I learned early that privacy was a privilege granted only when convenient for them, not a right I could claim. When I moved into my first apartment downtown at 26, I thought I had finally broken the pattern. A clean space, white walls, sunlight through the blinds, the hum of the city outside my own beginning. On move-in day, Marilyn asked for a spare key. Just in case of emergencies, she said, brushing her hand through my hair like I was still a child. I hesitated, but guilt crept in the way it always did, so I handed it over. I didn't realize then that I had also handed over my peace. For a few weeks, life felt normal. I adjusted to my job, decorated, slowly walked to the coffee shop around the corner on weekends. I breathed differently, but the signs of intrusion started small. A blanket folded at the wrong angle. A dish washed and put away in a place I never used. A faint trace of my mother's lotion lingering in the air long after I returned from work. Then, Marilyn began leaving food casseroles, soups, cookies with bright little notes taped to each container. You work too hard. Eat something real. Love you. The handwriting was sweet. The violation was not. Edward backed her, completely insisting they were simply looking out for me. To them, my independence was a phase, not a fact. The worst part wasn't the intrusions, it was how familiar they felt. Suddenly, I was 12 again, standing in the kitchen while Marilyn rearranged my backpack because she didn't like the way I organized it. I remembered the sting of being told my feelings were dramatic, my boundaries disrespectful. Their love always came with conditions: access, compliance, obedience. I tried talking to them gently at first, then firmly, then desperately. Nothing changed. If anything, they became more confident, convincing themselves they were helping me in ways I was too stubborn to appreciate. I wanted to believe they meant well. I wanted to believe I was safe. But deep down, a truth I had ignored for years was finally becoming impossible to escape. My parents didn't understand boundaries because they didn't believe I had the right to set any at all. The breaking in didn't stop, it escalated. At first, I tried convincing myself I was imagining it. Maybe I had moved that mug myself. Maybe I'd forgotten to close the cabinet. But denial only works until the truth becomes too obvious to ignore. One Wednesday evening, I came home to find my laundry neatly folded on my bed. Socks, paired shirts, smoothed everything, arranged with the kind of domestic precision only my mother possessed. My chest tightened. I hadn't done laundry in a week. I called Marilyn immediately. "Were you in my apartment today?" She didn't even hesitate. "Of course, honey. Your hamper was overflowing. I couldn't leave it like that. You can't just come in whenever you want. Jennifer, don't be ridiculous. You were at work. It's not like you were using the place." That sentence. "It's not like you were using the place" hit me harder than I expected, as if my home wasn't mine unless I was physically inside it, as if my existence only counted when it was convenient for her. A few days later, I found my fridge rearranged and stocked with groceries I never bought. Healthy meals, meal-prepped containers, vegetables washed and cut. Most people would consider it sweet. To me, it felt like someone had replaced my lungs with sand. Then came Lily. I walked into my bathroom early one morning and saw a bottle of luxury shampoo sitting on the shelf. Bright purple. Salon only. Definitely not mine. I froze. Lily used that brand? I called her, my voice tense. "Hey, did you stay at my place?" A pause. "Yeah." Mom said it was fine. I had a late shift and didn't want to drive home. She doesn't live here. You should have asked me. I mean, you weren't home. What's the big deal? There it was again. The same dismissiveness Marilyn wielded with expert precision. My space didn't matter. My consent didn't matter. My feelings didn't matter. I drove to my parents' house that afternoon, ready to finally demand the key back. But the moment I stepped inside, the familiar scent of pot roast and the soft clinking of dishes pulled me back into old habits: obedience, guilt, silence. Marilyn acted wounded. Edward said I was paranoid and Lily avoided my eyes. I left with nothing resolved and a tightening in my stomach that felt dangerously close to despair. Still, I tried again. I changed the locks, told myself that was it, problem solved. 2 weeks passed quietly, almost peacefully. I started to hope they had finally understood, but hope is fragile around people who refuse to see you. One Thursday evening, I opened my door and stopped cold. Sitting on my couch, comfortable, calm, sipping tea as if she owned the place, was Marilyn. She held up a shiny new key, smiling like she was sharing good news. "I called your landlord," she said. "He gave me this. I needed access in case of emergencies." Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically. Quietly, the way ice breaks under too much pressure. I changed the locks again, but this time it wasn't just the locks that changed. Something in me did too. I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. I was wrong. 3 weeks after the landlord incident, I came home and noticed my living room window cracked open. A soft breeze pushed the curtains inward. The screen lay on the floor like someone had ripped it out in a hurry. At first, I thought maybe it had fallen. Maybe the wind was strong. Maybe anything except the truth forming like a knot in my throat. Then I saw the casserole on my counter, still warm, covered neatly with foil. A sticky note on top in my mother's handwriting: "You're not eating enough." My stomach dropped. There was only one explanation. I called Marilyn, voice shaking. "Did you climb up to my window, Silence?" Then an almost offended scoff. "Well, your door was locked. What else was I supposed to do? I made you dinner. You climbed a trellis to break into my apartment." Don't be dramatic, Jennifer. If you would stop changing the locks like some rebellious teenager, I wouldn't have to. I pressed my hand to my forehead. "This is illegal. This is motherhood," she corrected. When I called Edward, hoping he'd understand, he sighed as if I were the unreasonable one. "She worries about you. Just give us a key. You're making this harder than it has to be." I hung up before my anger spilled into something I couldn't take back. It was no longer about food or laundry or even the key. It was the fact they felt entitled to every corner of my life, entitled to override every boundary I set, entitled to treat me like property. That night, lying awake with the window locked and curtains drawn tight, I realized something terrifying. I could change the locks 100 times and they'd find another way in. A landlord, a window, a trellis. They didn't believe I deserved privacy, and as long as they knew where I lived, they would keep proving it. The only way to restore my peace was to become unreachable. The next morning, I toured a building in the Pearl District, a tall, modern tower with a doorman named Victor who scanned every guest, every package, every unfamiliar face. Every detail of the place whispered one thing: I desperately needed safety. I signed the lease that afternoon. For 2 weeks, I packed silently. No posts on social media. No moving truck parked outside. Just Sophie and Rachel carrying boxes down the stairs one by one, whispering encouragement like soldiers helping me escape a war I'd been pretending wasn't happening. By sunset, my old apartment was empty. Every trace of me gone. I wiped the counters, turned off the lights, and stood in the doorway, one last time. Not sad, not nostalgic, just done. I dropped the keys into the landlord's mailbox and walked away without looking back. They thought they could enter my life whenever they wanted. Soon they were going to learn what it felt like when I finally shut the door. For the first 2 days after I moved, my phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. At first, they were casual check-ins. "How's your day? Call us when you're free," the kind of messages that pretended everything was normal. By day 3, the tone shifted. Shorter, sharper. Jennifer, answer your mother. This isn't funny. Call us immediately. I didn't respond. Silence, I realized, was the only language they didn't know how to manipulate. On the 4th day, the notifications stopped altogether. My phone sat quiet on my new kitchen counter, a tiny island of peace in a life that had felt invaded for so long. I made tea. I unpacked. I arranged my books on the shelf in an order that only I would touch. Victor nodded at me each morning as I passed through the lobby, offering a polite good afternoon, miss, with the respectful distance my parents had never mastered. For the first time in months, I felt like my breath reached all the way into my lungs. But calm never holds forever. On the 6th day, my phone erupted again, 20 missed calls in a row. My stomach tightened. I forced myself not to answer. Then, another call came through, and this time, the preview of the voicemail caught my eye. Jennifer, your apartment. Everything's gone. Where are you? I paused my breathing. They were at my old apartment. I walked to the window, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I imagined it, the empty living room, the stripped shelves, the bare floors. My parents standing in the doorway, confronted not just with absence, but with the reality they had created themselves. Another voicemail came. Marilyn's voice was shrill, breaking. Oh God, Jennifer, did someone take you? Your things are gone. The place is empty. Please, please, call us, sweetheart. I closed my eyes. This wasn't satisfaction. Not exactly, but it was a shift, a balance tipping. They weren't in control anymore. I let another day pass, then another. On the 3rd day, I finally called them back. Marilyn answered so quickly I didn't even hear the first ring. Jennifer, Jennifer, where are you? What is going on? We went to your apartment and it was empty. Do you hear me? Empty? I kept my voice steady. Why were you at my apartment? A stunned silence crackled through the line. Edward's voice burst in sharp with accusation. We hadn't heard from you in days. We were worried. We had every right to check on you. No, I said quietly. You didn't. Marilyn's voice returned frantic. Jennifer, stop this. Tell us where you are. Right now. No. The word landed like ice. No, she repeated as if it were physically impossible for her to process. No, I said again. You don't get to know where I live. Edward inhaled sharply. Excuse me, you heard me? This is insane, he snapped. We are your parents, and you treated my home like it was yours, I replied. You walked in whenever you wanted. You rearranged things. You let Lily stay over without asking. You got a new key behind my back. Mom climbed up a trellis. A trellis dad. Marilyn gasped. That was one time that should never have happened once. Silence again. Not the angry kind. Not the dramatic kind. The kind that meant they finally heard the truth in my voice. I continued. You didn't worry about me. You worried about losing control of me. Those are not the same thing. That's not fair, Edward muttered. Fair, I said. Do you want fair? Fair would have been respecting my boundaries years ago. Fair would have been treating me like an adult. Fair would have been listening when I said no. But you didn't. So now I'm doing the only thing left. Marilyn's breathing shook. Jennifer, please, just tell us you're safe. Please, I can't sleep. I can't eat. I've been sick with worry. Her guilt tactics, the tears, the emotional spirals, all the things that had always pulled me back into their orbit, washed over me like a wave that finally had no power to drag me under. I'm safe, I said. But I'm safe because I'm away from you. She sobbed. Edward whispered something I never expected to hear. I didn't know it was this bad. I swallowed. You didn't want to know. For a long moment, no one spoke. They were processing something new, something uncomfortable, something undeniable. I had changed, and the door they once walked through freely was no longer theirs. Marilyn sniffed. Jennifer, please. We just want to talk. Face to face. Then we can meet in public, I said. A cafe downtown, neutral space. No more home visits. Ever. You don't trust us, she whispered. I don't trust your boundaries, I corrected. Because you don't have any. Another silence, but this time it felt less like resistance and more like surrender. Marilyn finally said, "Okay." That word did something small but real in my chest. It didn't fix the past, it didn't erase the violations, but it was acknowledgement, and acknowledgement was a step. "Good," I said softly. "I'll text you a time and place. We'll talk then. But your address?" Edward tried one last time, one final grasp at the old power. "Shouldn't we know where you live in case—" "No," I said. "You will not have a key to my home. You will not have access to my home. My home is mine." He exhaled slowly. "All right." And just like that, the balance shifted entirely, not with shouting, not with slamming doors, but with a quiet, steady reclaiming of myself. After the call ended, I set my phone down and looked around my new apartment. Soft light spilled across the floor. The city hummed below. My things were exactly where I left them. My air was only mine. My silence was not avoidance, it was protection. For the first time in my life, my world felt sealed whole and owned by no one but me. We met 3 days later at a small cafe downtown, the kind with soft lighting and tables spaced far enough apart that no one had to whisper. I arrived early, choosing a seat by the window where I could see them walk in. My hands weren't shaking, my stomach wasn't tight. For the first time, I felt firmly rooted in myself. When Marilyn and Edward entered, they looked smaller, somehow, tired, cautious, stripped of the certainty they had always worn like armor. Marilyn hesitated before sitting, as if unsure she was allowed to occupy the space across from me. The conversation began quietly, no accusations, no tears. Just halting sentences and long pauses. Marilyn admitted she hadn't understood how suffocating her actions were. Edward said he thought he was protecting me, but now realized he had been protecting a version of me that no longer existed. I didn't rush to make them feel better. I didn't smooth over the discomfort. I simply told the truth. I need boundaries if we're going to have any kind of relationship. They both nodded, slow, reluctant, but sincere. We made an agreement. We would meet in public for now. No surprise visits, no keys, no access to my home. Respect goes both ways, and trust can only be rebuilt, not demanded. When we parted, Marilyn hugged me gently, carefully, as if she finally understood I wasn't something she could hold too tightly. Edward whispered, "We'll try," and for once, I believed him. I walked back to my new apartment with a lightness I hadn't felt in years. The lobby was quiet. Victor greeted me with his usual nod. And as I closed the door behind me, locking it with keys that belonged only to me, I realized something simple and profound. Peace isn't something you find. It's something you protect. Looking back, I used to think love meant allowing everything, even the things that hurt. Now I know love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's ownership. By walking away, I finally made room for something healthier to grow, not just with them, but within myself. If you've ever had to fight for your own peace, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more true family dramas. Sometimes disappearing isn't running, it's finally choosing yourself.